Yes. Sir. Oh, you can. Sorry. Okay.
Your live when you're locked in, it's time.
8:59. Doug, how are you feeling?
I am feeling great, thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Thanks to our illustrious EMS group. They kicked it in.
What happened?
I just had a minor heart attack, and I
Is any
fortunately,
heart attack minor?
not at the time,
No.
and looking at the rearview mirror, but,
Yeah.
you know, once I got to the hospital, I got some nitro in me, and then they put me in the ambulance and gave me a couple more, got the billings and got stabilized and did some tests. Okay, I'm gonna be on some medicine now, though.
Yeah. Aw.
First time in my life, I have to have some drugs.
Well, you're lucky you made it this far without that, right?
Yep, that's probably the best way to look at it.
Yeah.
Oh, have you been working on that?
I tried to this morning, and then the insulators and the electrician showed up, and then I got pulled away, and so it's not done, but it's getting there. I will send it to you guys hopefully before the next meeting.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. And, the minutes were fairly brief. I apologize, because I was sorry.
I think they captured.
Okay.
They
I'm like,
do.
oh my God. Okay, so if you're okay with them, vote to approve.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. I will second, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's get back to our project that we're working on, the short-term rental, cleanup of the ordinance 963 and the good neighbor policy and our annual review. They kind of all go together, so, at our last meeting, on the ordinance itself, city staff would like more guidance, I guess, on adding some teeth, so to speak, I guess, to the ordinance itself on, when and how do you, pull a registration, take away a registration, you know, when they're not in compliance. So, I think we need to, I'm glad Dennison is here, because, you know, obviously it's more like we have the, in our zoning and in our ordinance, you know, you have to be within 30 minutes, you have to have your, fire inspections and your, sanitation done. So those are the three big ones, I think, that we can really focus on. If they aren't in, if they're not in compliance, you know, then we
They
need-
wouldn't get their
well,
registration then, right?
No, but right now, I think it's kind of more of a, I don't know that we've got anything in there where they're verifying where the person lives for the 30 minutes.
Okay.
I think that's gonna be the biggest
Come up.
thing.
It's also come up where people say, you know, I'm 30 minutes away, and then later we find out that they're not.
Yeah,
Or another situation has arisen where they are in compliance, they get their, everything's, and then they come out of compliance on one of those issues.
right,
And then what do you do?
right. So, what,
Ankle monitors.
I know. Well, it comes down to, you know, if the police are called, and, I mean, we need to make sure that that point of contact is also notified, and they need to be there within 30 minutes. And if they're not there within 30 minutes, then, you know, do they automatically, lose their registration, or do we give them, you know, how many
That's
times?
kind of harsh though, because like, if
Well,
you
that's
have
what
a
it-
short-term rental and you have to go to
Yeah.
run to Bozeman or something for,
Well, but technically, the way it's written, if you have your property rented out that night, you need to be within 30 minutes. So you just, if you're going to Bozeman, then you can't rent your property out that night. I mean, basically, if,
Or you have to have a surrogate?
yeah, you have to
or-
have a surrogate, someone watching it
Say,
for you then.
yeah, do you have the ability to have somebody you designate that can respond?
Yeah. And that is written in there, you know, you can designate someone to respond. So you can't just, I mean, it's a big responsibility. You can't just go on vacation for 2 weeks, have your place rented out that whole time and have no one here.
I agree that taking away their license the first time is harsh,
yeah, it is
but
harsh.
I don't know that on the second is harsh, but that's council's call. But I think that's your biggest meat is you've agreed to do this and you aren't doing it, and therefore you lose your right.
Yeah.
And you guys just decide on how many warnings does somebody get before that happens? Is that the question?
Yes. I mean, because I think we need to build that into our ordinance so that city staff and Dennison, you know, our city attorney, you know, because I'm assuming you would send paperwork, you know, send a notice, a legal notice to them saying you did not respond. I mean, that's what we put in the ordinance. I mean, how do we want to proceed so that it's there?
And however you guys write it, that's easy. Just
Okay.
do it as it's written. It just needs to be clear, because it's, I mean, the letters and forms that go out are very simple. It says, you know, this is the ordinance, you violated it, this is the consequence. That's written.
Yeah.
So that's what needs to be in the ordinance, very clear steps.
Okay.
So violations like first offense would be a warning, or something like that?
Yeah.
And then,
That's you guys.
Well, and I think they also need to, provide an explanation of why they were not there. You know, do you really live within 30 minutes? You know, does your point of contact live within 30 minutes? Because no one showed up. So I think they would need to get a warning letter and with an action item that they need to say where they're at or who their point of contact is and where that person lives. Because they were not in compliance with the ordinance. And, if they cannot provide that, then they lose it, even with the first one. Or they need to, you know, designate someone within 30 days, that's within 30 days, you know, 30 minutes. I mean, I think this is the one case where, I mean, we have to treat everyone equally, and we have a lot of people that are you know, the majority of them are complying with this. And,
and how would one know if that didn't happen? Would the renter contact the city and just say,
well, that's where we need to, if the police are called, you know, there's a complaint filed, whether, and that's what we kind of need to talk about too, but I mean, if it's a case where the police are called to the residence and a point of contact does not show up, you know, because it's over, they're having a big party or what have you, or they're over occupancy, you know, because there's too many people on the property and, so I guess that's kind of, you know, that's another thing, you know, over occupancy, if they're continuously renting it out for, you know, that's a public health and safety issue, they're stuffing 15 people in and the occupancy is only 10, you know,
is
that would be,
limited by the fire department?
it is, yeah.
And so do they have any teeth in
Well-
enforcing that kind of thing?
They
And that would
would,
go to the renter, not to the property owner, right?
well, the property owner has an occupancy on their property.
Right.
And
probably
it's,
on
and
the rental
it's their,
agreement too.
and if the police get called because there's a party and it's over occupancy, then, I mean, and it becomes a continuous thing, then obviously the owner is not enforcing the occupancy of their property. You know, it could be that. So that would be another, you know, if it's a continuous issue. You know, one time, a couple times, I mean, it can happen, people sneak people in.
Yeah, that's
You
what I'm
know,
saying, that
that-
the property owner
but-
may not know.
Yeah, but, you know, if you're continuously getting complaints about it, then, I don't know, that's what we need to talk about. The city staff would like more teeth in the ordinance on what do we do in this situation? What do we, you know, do you want them to, you know, lose their registration? Because I can tell you their neighbors are not gonna be very understanding about the whole thing, when things like this are happening.
Mhm.
So, which is, probably the ones who called the police in the first place. So, you know, I mean, we passed this ordinance, under, you know, public health and safety, for these reasons. And I just feel like we need some teeth in it to help enforce it.
Okay.
So, and I mean, I don't necessarily want to just like one strike, you're out kind of thing, but there are certain cases though where it's written in there, you said you'd be within 30 minutes and you're not. That's a big one. So you can't be there to address the fact that there's 15 people in a house that's only supposed to sleep 10.
So what if, there's 10 people that stay there, but they invited a couple friends over just for a couple hours, and they're
And that's
allowed?
fine.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's sleeping, yeah. It's just, if they turn it into a big frat party, you know, then that's probably not fine.
So we're simply trying to enforce the 30 minutes. This is not, I mean, there are,
Well, that's just one of the issues that we actually have in our zoning under short-term rentals, and we have in the, and it's codified. I mean, it will be codified when we're done. It's not codified yet, because that ordinance wasn't codified. But we need to create a section in there, I guess. If these are not met, you will lose your license after so many times, type of thing.
mhm.
Because there's,
What about other things like, you know, repeated calls to the hotline or
well,
parties, garbage, you know, like the things that we get calls on repeatedly? Is that, I'm just asking, I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting this is how
I
you
think
handle
you've got
it.
to be careful if you're gonna go to, I think there's proven complaints. You don't want to create a mechanism that if I just call 23 times,
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
then
There's-
I, as a neighbor, can
get rid of
eliminate
the
their
short-term
path.
rental next to me,
Yeah.
yeah.
exactly.
So I think it has to be things that are in, our zoning. If you go back to our zoning from the planning board, it has the guidelines for short-term rentals, and council approved those. So those are the things we want to make sure are in the ordinance. You know, the public health and safety, the, part of it, and the 30-minute is, I mean, the 30-minute to me is the big thing. Because a lot of times, I mean, yeah, it's not in the owner's control what that tenant does once they're there. You can't be there babysitting them, but you do need to be there within 30 minutes to respond if there is a problem and take care of it.
Just thinking, do we want to put anything about that in our guest guidelines to let them know that you should have 30-minute response if you have any problems?
No,
No?
I wouldn't, because that's gonna go in there to the guests, and, because honestly, if they have an emergency, they're just gonna call 911, you know, or if they should have their host contact information anyway, and they will call for things like, you know, backed up toilets and all of that kind of stuff right away, you know, to that. So this is more for, as part of the application for the short-term rental, you know, they're signing an affidavit, basically saying that they meet all these requirements and that they have all this paperwork done. They understand what the occupancy is, they understand, you know, that they will be within, they'll have either themselves or a designee as the point of contact within 30 minutes.
Mhm.
So in the ordinance, do we want to be specific as in reference to that 30 minutes? In other words, if you're one time, you get a warning, but if twice, you're gonna get a fine? Is that-
I don't think
Third
it's,
time you get revoked.
yeah.
When
Well,
does the ankle bracelet come on?
Yeah. Are you really 30 minutes late? Your ankle
Yeah.
bracelet says you're in school.
I know,
I like that.
yeah. I think it's more, I think that's what we need to discuss. I think if you're not in compliance with that you really don't live within 30 minutes, then I think you lose your registration until you find a designee that's in 30
And I
minutes.
think Doug's observation, and maybe the question is, my understanding is, yes, the ordinance is the mechanism whereby you lay that out.
Yeah.
We do. The question is just, the discussion is the thresholds.
Right,
Not how. The how is,
Right.
yes, the ordinance.
Okay.
right,
The threshold is something you all discuss and decide, and then persuade council to your thinking.
yeah. So, Yeah, I mean, if it's a no-show, I mean, if you're just 10 minutes late, that's understandable, you know, I mean, I can see that, you know, where someone, I just ran to Billings, you know, I'm sorry, I had to run to Billings, it was a you know, that, but, if you're a no-show, I mean, that's the issue, I think.
What constitutes a no-show? So if I'm supposed to...
You just don't show up.
If I'm supposed to respond in 30 and it takes me an hour, rather than a no-show, is that if it takes longer than, the expectation is 30,
Yeah,
if there is a time when it is exceeds 60 and or no-show,
yeah,
and that's a violation, you get one of those.
right,
The second time, you're subject to be revoked.
yeah,
My guess is that you would, and I welcome, council's input, my guess is that what I would probably do is say, let's say one time.
okay,
You get one pass. The second time, your license is subject to be revoked. But I think the second part of that is, and maybe council will say it's a good idea, or maybe council will say it's a bad idea. Once revoked, there's an appeal to the full council. So you have the option of going to council and saying, well, here's the circumstances. But again, keep in mind scalable, repeatable.
yeah, I maybe not, revoked, but I would say if you have a no-show, your license gets suspended. And,
To me, no show in a useful time period. I showed up 2 weeks later.
yeah, no,
So is it 30 minutes? Is it an hour?
Right.
Is it 2 weeks?
let me fix, I'm just saying, a temporary suspension until you get it fixed. Like, either you prove that you live within 30 minutes,
Yes.
or you have a designee, you know, because in the case that, Danae was talking to me about, it may be that this person, lives out of state. And so who is your designee, because you didn't show up, and we don't know where you live, you know, and so we suspend your license until you show us where you live, who the designee is, and, you know, and then if you do it again, then yeah, it gets revoked, and you have to appeal it, permanent revoked, and then you can appeal it to council.
And however you guys want to do it, it doesn't matter to me, actually. It just has to have, because I know what the letter's gonna look like, it just has to say, you know, this is the ordinance,
Yeah,
this is what it says that needs to happen, this is what you failed to do, and so this is also the ordinance language that says, this is the consequence.
yeah,
And so that's it. So it just has to be very clear on what exactly they have to do, and then
Yeah.
put in what they didn't do, and then what the consequence is, which is the black and letter.
And what you're saying is, you're saying on first offense, it's
Mhm.
suspended until they demonstrate that they have it, and then on second offense, it's revoked.
yeah,
And I would say, to council's point, we already have that letter written. When we write the agenda, we should have a sample draft letter written,
okay,
just so we know what it looks like, because as we do that, that will tell us, ooh, here's something we didn't include in the ordinance,
right.
or that'll help do it out, so.
I just think that this is a very serious part of our ordinance, because the whole point, we don't want the city to have to babysit. We don't want our police department to have to
Yeah.
babysit these. We want that point of contact within, and to be there within, you know,
Do they have to
preferably within
physically-
30 minutes,
Do they
but
have to physically be there within 30 minutes?
I
They
believe
should be
that's,
able to.
yeah, I believe that's the way it is, yeah.
The one question is, what is the triggering event? So what I mean by that is,
Yeah, that's my question too.
yeah, because like if police get called out all the time, you know, fireworks,
Yeah,
issues, they show up, no citation's gonna be written. A lot of times citations aren't written.
right.
Does that trigger the people coming out, even though there's no citation written?
In the case where the
Or-
fireworks happened up on the golf course, the property manager was there within 30 minutes. They
Yeah.
called her and she
So,
showed
so
up.
the trigger is, the
Yeah.
trigger is when the property manager is notified
Right,
that something requires attention.
Yeah.
It's not whether there's a citation issued or not. When the
Right.
property manager is notified. So I think what you're hearing is things that you need to make sure are very clear in the language of
Okay.
the ordinance.
yeah, and I think when,
And then who notifies them, what needs to be notified?
well, and that's just it, do we want it, right now, when are they asking for the I think it's, when is the property, if the property manager is requested
Yep.
to be on site to address an issue, and they do not show up,
Yeah.
then, you know,
Within 30 minutes.
within 30 minutes, then that's an issue.
No, and that's fine,
I've-
just gotta be
I've-
clear on who's making that decision on property manager.
And when are they requested to show up? Like, what is,
Yeah,
That needs to be.
Yeah, when does the clock start?
right?
yeah,
And by the way, do the police have access, let's suppose this happens on a Saturday or in an evening, which is the most likely time this is going to happen.
mhm.
Do police have access to that database? Do they know who to reach out to for property management? Or,
Yeah, do they ask that question?
then the second thing is, I think we're required that that the local property manager's contact information, well, it's available within the house, but what about do the neighbors? So I'm 2 doors down from a property. I'm gonna call dispatch because I don't know any better. So I call dispatch.
Right,
Dispatch sends an officer out. Does the officer make a judgment call as to whether he calls the property manager? And if so, does he have that information available to do that?
right.
And if he decides not to call the property manager can't be expected to respond because they
no,
haven't
yeah.
been notified.
And that seems kind of just from a officer standpoint, when officers show up to an issue, usually they're not thinking, oh, this is a civil issue, I need to talk to the property manager and get him down here. Usually they're saying, is safety concerns.
Right.
Is there a violation of the law?
Right,
And usually like a partner family member assault charge, they're not even gonna think about the property manager.
No,
What
no,
they're
and I
doing
wouldn't
is they're
expect them
taking
to.
people out here, they're gonna take this guy, they're putting him in jail, they're driving up to YPF.
Right.
And so putting that on the police officer to make that call, I don't know if that is the right thing to do, just from logistical standpoint, because that's not even in their wheelhouse, or what
Right.
they're thinking about when they show up to the scene.
Yeah, so the one that Danae was talking about, like,
Yeah.
what was the mechanism there for contacting the city? Like, how did that all happen? You know?
she was gonna get more information because, there was apparently it was 2 vacation rentals and they share a hot tub, and a disturbance broke out between the 2 parties, and the neighbor called 911, and there was like 20 people there and over 20 people.
I think this is in my neighborhood.
Yeah, and
Right
so
across the
it
alley
was
from me.
over occupancy, there was a disturbance, it was 1 in the morning, so it was a noise ordinance too, it was way past quiet hours. You know, it basically was a party that got out of hand type of situation, I believe.
Alcohol involved.
Alcohol involved, yeah, and, I don't know who made the call to the property manager, but the property manager did not, or the owner did not show up.
So, and again, if
I-
this is 1 o'clock in the morning, if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, it sounds to me like there's a responding officer that's making the
No, there's,
call.
the police did respond.
How did they have that information?
I don't know if they called her, if they tried to call, or if it was the hotline that, because typically if you call the hotline will immediately, call the owner and let them know. That's, I believe, is that right, Lonnie?
I have no idea how
I'm
that
like,
hotline works.
see, we need to completely understand how this works with the hotline versus dispatch. Because, if it goes into dispatch, do they call the property? No, they don't call.
I'm absolutely certain that
They
our
won't, okay.
MOU with dispatch does not say,
Say,
you're required to keep track of all of our short-term rentals, so you can reach out and call them.
Right, yeah, and I wasn't sure if, typically they call the
And
owner.
I would, if I were guessing on the complaint line, I think it's just a recording that's waiting for us to respond to the next day.
Well, I don't know.
I don't
I-
know, but I can, in that situation, I could put $10, the officers that show up,
Mhm.
they're
Should I
gonna
call the
separate all
hotline?
the people out, they're gonna handcuff some people, they're
Yeah.
gonna make sure everybody's taking statements. Their first thought is not, let me call the property manager. Is this a short-term rental? Let me call the property
Yeah,
manager.
and it shouldn't be. The police
No, it
just-
shouldn't be.
No.
Well, and I, see, I'm not quite as certain that that's not, it's certainly not their first thing, but.
I think it should be in the list.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's not on their list, but particularly if that's a 1 minute exercise and now I'm done, they get to handle it, I don't have to deal with it anymore. It actually could be a load freer
Right,
for officers, it's just a tool.
right.
But again, I would bet a nickel they don't have access to that information right now.
I know, so I think we need to get them access to that information somehow.
Okay.
Because we have an ordinance that person will be called, so that's part of what we need to be doing. You know, especially if we're
So
gonna say you didn't show up. well, you
we've gone
need to be called.
from, you get a warning, it'll be suspended, you have to demonstrate that you have the ability to do it, and then the next time it's taken away,
Right,
and you can appeal it to council if you want, or we've kind of laid that out.
right.
But what we've not said is,
When do they
how
get
is,
called?
who you gonna call? And that initial, what is it you're in violation of not responding to? Because to me, the only practical thing in that is like, do we, and again, this could go back to the ordinance. If I have a short-term rental, am I required to make sure that everybody within 3 houses either direction has that contact information so that they have the ability to call, or what?
No, I think it needs to be more on the city level. I think, I do believe the police need that information to be able to call that person. I mean, because at 1 a.m, there's no one else on staff here that can pull that up and call.
I kinda agree, the police need to get involved at some point, but you take this example of
Yeah.
two brawls, I mean, the police are gonna take care of safety, arrest people.
Yeah,
They were doing
As-
that whether it was short-term rental or not.
What,
Right.
right, but I mean, as opposed to they get called and there's a dog barking there. Well, the police don't need to get involved with that, they need to
well,
contact
they
the,
can, we have an ordinance against it.
well, the point is they need to
They're supposed
contact the owner.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah, to me, the reason we give them the information is because it lightens their load, because they get to say, this is not something I need to be
Right,
dealing with.
right.
Well,
And so
and it also, I mean, like, exactly, yeah, you need the property manager or the designee there to say, you know, what's going on here, this is ridiculous, you guys have way too many people here, we have quiet hours, you know, you're kicked out, go, you know, or.
Are you set on, or how set on are you that the neighbors don't need the contact information? The reason I ask the question is because there are rental properties in my neighborhood, they're the professionally managed ones. I know who does them,
Yeah,
and if there's an issue going on, if there's 5 dogs in the yard and they get out and they're coming over and they're attacking my dog, I call the property manager, but that's because I have that information.
right,
Are we sure that's not part of the process? Is that you notify people
You
within some
could,
radius that
but
this is the property manager?
I just,
No,
And
I
you might run
understand
into
that.
the neighbors that are so against the short-term rentals.
I know, I
that
think
they're
that's
gonna be calling them
Right.
over any little inconvenience.
Yeah, I don't think you
Yeah.
should involve the neighbors at all.
Mhm.
Maybe,
that was my reservation about it.
if it's required that the ownership is on the wall or somewhere in the house, so that the police have it right there in front of them.
Ah, now
That's true,
good
Yeah,
idea.
that-
So they don't
that does.
necessarily have a database or a spreadsheet or
yeah,
whatever.
they just.
It's in
required
the
to
house
post
and they look out and they know who to
Because
call and
that's
say.
another, I think, requirement of the ordinance, is that they have to have the good neighbor policy in there, and right on there, and have it in a visible space, with the contact information on it, and then the police can just call right there. That's
Yeah,
great.
because the police can call when they see fit. If they're gonna take care of the emergency first
Yep,
and then call.
yep,
But is there a possibility that dispatch calls in, I have a barking dog, to use Jody's example, and
Yeah.
I'm the officer, and I'm prioritizing my calls? This is not something I don't want to deal with at all. Rather than just saying I'm not dealing with it, if they had access to the ability, now, to get back to it, they could say, hi, we got a call, I'm pawning this off on you because it's not a police matter, and be done.
Mhm.
So they still have to have access to that level of information somewhere.
Well, like you said, if it's required to be put on a wall somewhere, maybe where the.
But now I have to
occupancy is.
go and respond to do it.
Yeah, but if you just walk in and get the number, call the guy, you're done.
Well, and I think that they try to respond to every call that they get, even if it's a barking dog. I mean, you do, I mean, it is in our ordinance, after, you know, a certain,
But,
a dog that's continuously barking
but
is
if I'm in the middle of
against our
a
animal
meth bust, that barking dog is way down the road.
Oh, I understand that, yes, yes. But if you're in the middle of a meth bust, you're probably not gonna take the time to call anyway. You're like, I don't know.
And I was thinking a lot of times from a police standpoint, they're not just gonna magically know all the short-term rentals in town, or they're not gonna check the doors. I mean, they show up, because what comes over the dispatches, we have an issue
Yeah,
at this location. They would show up to the location, take care of the issue, and they might walk away. They might not know that it is a short-term rental.
right.
Well, don't they ask for who is the owner of the house when they get there?
Sometimes, depends what the issue is.
Yeah, if it's a rental, long-term rental, they don't. I mean,
That's what I'm
it's
saying,
not-
depends what
yeah,
the issue is,
yeah.
and how fast they can take care of it is. If there's two people out front brawling and they can see what the issue is, probably just gonna handcuff them and take them down, or,
But I think most of the time,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, most of the time when it's called in by the neighbor, they're gonna say, the short-term rental next to me, or it's like having, you know, there's all these people here, they're having a big party, I don't know what they're doing. You know, the neighbors know it's a short-term rental.
But it's
and
interesting,
they-
as we walk this out, and we, like I said, we look at the letter and we say this, but it's like, wait a minute, where's this gonna start? Where is?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, once again, it doesn't matter what you guys come up with. It just has to say, you know, here's the clear black letter law, this is what the ordinance says.
Yep.
This is the triggering event, this is what you did to violate it, black letter law, this is the consequence.
yeah. Well, and there may be times where they don't need to call the property owner or manager. You know, it doesn't always, they don't always, it's only if they get called and they don't show up, that's the
Yeah.
trigger. So, I mean, if they never get called, yeah, we can't expect them to show up out of thin air, absolutely, you know, but if they do, in this case, they got called and they did not show up.
Who, in the case you're referring to, was it front office that called them?
I don't know who called them. I'd have to ask Janae. Oh. She just said that, you know. And I don't know if it was the neighbor that called him. I don't know if it was police that called them, or if it was the hotline that tried to call him. You know, I don't know where, Janae was gonna get more information on it.
Because my thinking is when you call the hotline, that's for all rentals.
Mhm.
It's not gonna say, you know, renter 372, and I therefore have their phone number, and I'm gonna, we could call into it and do a test, but
Yeah.
it seems like I did that once, and it was just to leave a message.
Mm. Hopefully it says something, if this is an actual emergency, please dial 911. Don't leave it on there. Like,
And is this just to clarify, is this a short-term rental registration or license? I
It's
remember now.
supposed to be registration, that's
Registration,
why,
okay, that's what I thought.
that's what we have to fix
That's
in
one of the
there.
things that.
Yes, and we have to, codify it, so we have to put what part of the code is actually changing, in there, and,
Yeah, when somebody gets written a ticket, that it references a section of municipal code, not an ordinance number.
well, I will, get with Janae and find out what other information she found out. And I will also ask her, you know, what triggers a phone call to the owner,
Yeah,
and who makes it.
that's the big question.
Yeah,
What triggers a phone call to the owner?
or a manager, yeah, and who makes it.
And where does the 30 days, or 30,
30 minutes.
Well, I don't think we even have it in the ordinance, but it's in our zoning. That's what I'm saying, it's, we need to make that part of the ordinance. So in our zoning, if you pull it up on, under uses for short-term rental, there's a list of things that they have to do. And we need to make that part of our ordinance, so that if they're not doing it, then here's the repercussions.
Are they required to have a backup or backup designee?
They should, I mean, because that's part of
But I
it.
mean, are they required to?
Well,
And should they be required to?
it says that you have, either you or your designee have to be able to respond within 30 minutes. So,
So you don't have to have a designee.
no, it can be you personally.
Yeah, I'm just
It
wondering
can
if
be the
it-
owner, or it can be your property manager, or you can be your cleaning lady, but you have to have someone there that you've given that power to show up and that responsibility to. Because I know someone who lives in Bozeman, and they have, but their designee is the person who goes in and cleans the property for them all the time,
Yeah.
and is here in town. So it doesn't have to be another property manager or anything like
No.
that. It just has to be someone who can show up and has that authority to
Right.
take care of
So,
issues.
to answer the question, they do have to have a designee.
Yeah, if they can't be here, yeah, they have to have a designee, but,
Here's short-term rental zoning regulations. This is up to 2022 though.
yep, that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
So, owner,
Is that an ordinance you're looking at, or?
No, it's the
I'm looking
zoning.
at just the zoning, it's 3 pages, compliance with laws, safety, health, signage, operation, yeah, everything says license, everywhere. Rental agreement,
Oh,
property
it's the
management,
zoning
okay.
too.
The short-term rental property shall be managed by a local property manager / owner, which is a person who must be available to take and respond within 30 minutes to reports of concerns and complaints, 24 hours per day, 7 days a week during the rental period. The local property manager may be an owner or authorized agent of the property.
So that's what we need to codify and have in our ordinance, because right now, it's technically just in our zoning, the zoning guidelines.
So we get back to that question you just said a while ago, what is the mechanism to contact ownership? What has to get triggered that we have to contact ownership? There's nothing in there right now, right?
No, it's just, if whoever is, well, according to this, if it's a complaint even, they're supposed to be able,
I guess if my interpretation of that would be, if you are summoned to respond, like, you need to be available to respond.
And if that happens 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I can see how that happens. But in my mind, logically, that's not the most likely opportunities that
But
they're
then-
going to be, need to be summoned.
Yeah, but, I mean, they're not gonna be summoned for everything, so if they're summoned and they fail to show up, at some point, you know, Lonnie or Danae or you are gonna know about it, and then it kinda kicks into, you know, you gotta prove where you are,
yeah,
or tell us why you didn't respond,
or who you're,
And then-
who should be responding, if it's
and
not
then
you,
the
you know?
second time, if that happens again, I
And,
mean, I'm not
and
thinking
that has to
that
be
it's gonna happen
timely, or
very
there's
often.
not a need to respond. Hi,
Right,
I'm calling because last night at 1 o'clock, we got a complaint that there was a lot of noise going on at your place. Okay?
yeah.
Is it still happening?
No, yeah, it has to be a reason for I mean, if they've been asked to show up at a place and they don't show up,
So there's 2 questions, that one and what triggers it to begin with.
right.
So those are the 2 main issues we need to resolve, put into the ordinance.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, we can definitely clarify that. Like I said, let me get with Danae and find out right now who has been summoning, you know, calling the property manager or the owner to show up. You know, who is it? Is it the police? You know, is it,
What is in place?
yeah, what is in place right now? Who's actually making that call?
I-
Is it the neighbor? I'm like, who is it? Yeah.
I have a question for council having to do with zoning. My understanding, if I kind of do a demarc, zoning really has to do with something up until the time it gets built?
So, if you're gonna issue a citation to anybody, you can reference zoning, but you shouldn't usually.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
That shouldn't be your strongest,
No,
No.
yeah.
but right
Exactly.
now,
So it should be
yeah.
in code,
But that's
well,
where
it should
it
be an
is.
ordinance, which then gets codified.
yeah, the ordinance enforces the zoning.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
ordinance is what you reference.
Is ordinance
yeah.
is what creates code.
And right now, we do not have any of this in our ordinance, so
Yeah.
it
Therefore
is
not in
not,
our code.
it's really
Not in our-
not even enforceable, except for the fact that when they get their registration, they're saying
Yeah.
they meet these requirements. But we don't have an ordinance to back that up right now. So we
Right.
need our ordinance
We
to
don't
have
have,
that,
we don't have municipal code to back that up.
right.
Ordinance is how we create that municipal code.
So because we don't have that, they really don't have any teeth to enforce the application. And they would like some more guidelines on that.
Yeah, so we could just pull some of the stuff out of the
Yes.
zoning and put them into the ordinance,
Yes.
yeah. And as a whereas,
No, it would be as therefore.
therefore,
It would be like down here in section 1, 2, it would be,
yeah.
because the whereas is saying that,
Could be
Yeah.
enforcement.
yeah, so therefore,
Or
this is
penalty
how we're
section.
enforcing. And then also, you know, in the ordinance itself, are there other situations where they could potentially get their license suspended or revoked? You know, if they're continuously over
Mhm.
occupancy, you know, are you advertising, you know, what's your advertising look like? You know, I know you can only sleep 10, but you know, are you advertising more than that? Or you know, that type of thing. Because to me, if you're saying it sleeps 15 and the fire department says 10, then that's, you know, you need to get your license or your registration suspended until you fix that. You know, there's some blatant, like, going, you know, if it's a blatant infraction like that, then I think you're suspended until you fix it, and if you don't fix it, then it's revoked.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's gonna be some clear cut and dry reasons. And I don't know that we really wanna address, you know, do a habitual complaints type of situation. I mean, if, like, then you get into the, like Dave says, the neighbor that doesn't like, or Doug says, the neighbor just doesn't like short-term rentals, so they just call in complaints every time someone's staying there, because
Yeah.
it irritates them. So.
Maybe just the penalty section and.
Okay. Any other thoughts on any of this, guys?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I'll get with Danae, try to get a clearer understanding of how it's working right now,
Right.
and then I think that will help guide us when we write it. Because she was actually gonna talk to the police about it and see, you know, or get a copy of the police, ask for a copy of the police report to see what it looked like. And then, Chris is still working on our good neighbor policy to make it, it's pretty much written, it's just
Yeah.
ordinances and, links to the ordinances in those spots, so we have those.
And I did have right now, it used to say good neighbor policy, and then I think you or Chelsea changed it to short-term rental, good neighbor guest guidelines.
Yes,
So
yes,
that would need to be updated in here too,
okay,
so it's not a policy guideline.
okay,
And I did make a note of that.
Right. okay. Let's see, okay. And then the other big things that we had were, updating those categories too, of the short-term rental. too. So we kind of almost out of time here, so we'll address that more. And that was based on, the scenarios of, you know, if it's a timeshare versus a, with multi-units, yeah. And this came into play with, or, and adding, if they have a property manager on site 24 hours a day, that those would not count against the threshold. And that would be like, the chateau, because they're individually owned, and each individual unit should have, you know, public health and safety meet the requirements, but they would not count against the threshold because they do have a property manager on site
So this would be
24 hours a
owner,
day.
this would be owner, so
We-
type one would be owner occupied
Right,
or
property
on-site
property
property manager.
management, yeah. Or employee on, you know, somebody on site 24 hours a day. So that if it's acting more as a hotel motel, you know, it's not gonna count
Mhm.
necessarily against that threshold.
Yeah.
But they do need individual licenses, because each unit still has to, you know, they're owner-owned, and their owner, you know, the owner is responsible for all.
We wanna spell that out, individual registrations are required for each
Unit,
unit,
Yes.
of the multi-unit.
yeah. And then the opposite of that was, if it's a timeshare where it's one owner, but people are buying into the timeshare,
So we
then,
determined that was one unit.
that was,
Right.
yeah.
It was all this one tax ID.
Right, yeah, so
Okay.
that would be, it would still count against the threshold, but it's one unit.
Cause that would be under type two.
Type two, yes. I think that's how we were doing that, so. And I will, yeah, it's been so crazy.
I know.
I'm like, I really need to sit down and just start
Yeah,
working on this, and maybe we can have like a work session where we just, at the next one, where we just go through and type it up with what we
Yeah.
need and what
Do
we
you-
want,
If you have, I mean, I can,
'cause
I mean, I don't wanna promise anything and under-deliver.
I know,
over like I
that's
haven't,
me too,
But,
so.
if we have an actual copy of it, I'm happy to get it, you know,
Okay,
started.
yeah, I will see if I can get a Word document copy of that. And-
Okay. And at least, you know, go and do the low-hanging fruit, like registration instead of license, and I can, redline it so everybody sees what changes I've made.
Okay,
Um,
perfect, thank you.
and get it in a Word
Okay.
or in a, well, you know, of course, I'll use a Google Doc.
I know, that's okay. Oh, any other items for this? We will also, we need to start working on the, presentation too.
Mhm.
I'll get those. Danae was getting some additional information for that, for us, like the number of calls and the types of calls that are coming into the hotline,
Mhm.
and, we'll just do that, try to get that done.
November looks good for me.
Okay, I know, I know. Oh, I know. Well, it'll get better here in October.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily want it to get better, because that means the pass closes and all the tourists are gone, but
I just have to have my employees stop taking vacations.
I know. Yes. Yeah, they're like, it's slow, I can take a vacation, but it's not slow. I'm still busy. Anything else, guys?
Who wants to raise their hand for signing warrants?
Oh, gosh.
You wanna do
Awesome.
it?
No, I'm just joking.
I can probably do it.
Doug, how are you in for time?
I'm good.
You wanna do that?
I'll be
today?
glad to. Not a problem.
Thank you.
It's one, we need two of you.
I think I can do it,
Thank you.
I think, as long as
Thank
my
you both.
employees showed up.
Yeah, appreciate that.
It's always enlightening.
Oh, my God.
It is, isn't it?
It's like, what? They charging how much?
I know. Places are crazy.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm glad you're better, Doug, and
Thank you.
welcome back, and
Yep.
I think we're good.
Got
Adjourn?
Yes, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Dennison, for your help and input. Thank you,